I am Nora, 43 years old, and the night my parents wheeled a BMW into the driveway with a red bow for my sister, they handed me an envelope with $1 and called it tradition. The porch light hummed. I tasted metal and smiled anyway. At 2:57 a.m., I packed 2 bags, turned my phone face down, and by 3, I was gone. Before we begin, tell me where you are watching from. Please like and subscribe and stay with me right here now. My duplex sits among others, just like it, 2 stories of shingled patience facing a narrow street where kids chalk hopscotch when the weather is brave. Inside, my mornings have the same small choreography. Oatmeal with a shake of cinnamon, a chipped gray mug filled to the brim, a quiet minute by the window while the radiator clanks itself awake. That mug was a yard sale find years back. A flecked glaze, a tiny chip on the lip, nothing anyone else would keep. I keep it because it fits my hand, because whatever is slightly damaged carries truth I can trust. I am the program coordinator at a neighborhood library branch. My days are flyers and whiteboards and people trying again. On Saturdays, I hold resume workshops for anyone who wanders in, and on Thursdays, I kneel on a carpet square in the children's room and make my voice big for story hour. I know which families bring a stroller because it doubles as a grocery cart. I know which teens need a place to sit that is not a couch surrounded by judgment. I write grants that sometimes land and sometimes do not. I like work that ends with a real thing you can touch. A schedule, a handout, a patron who says thank you with their whole face. What I am beyond my family is a woman who has built a life on steady legs. I budget down to the week and list grocery prices in a notebook so I can see when the canned tomatoes creep up. I can replace a faucet seal and find the little felt pads in the hardware aisle that keep chair legs from arguing with the floor. I keep an emergency fund at a credit union with a lobby that always smells like lemon cleaner. I pay my bills on time, sweep the steps, carry my own groceries. None of this is a medal. It is a choice. I learned to expect less attention than my younger sister Lily across 3 memories that still taste like their own air. Once in high school during prom season, my mother took Lily shopping at a boutique with mirrors as tall as movie screens. I hemmed a thrift store dress by hand with a needle that kept bending and a tube of fabric glue that smelled like vinegar. Lily sparkled. I smiled for the camera and stood at the edge of the frame so the seams would not show. Later, when college came, my parents covered part of Lily's tuition after a year of travel. They insisted she needed to find herself. I worked 2 jobs, one at a deli, with hands that always smelled like cold cuts and bleach, and took night classes until my bones set into the rhythm of it. After graduation, there was a flu year when Lily was so sick, she slept on my couch while my parents sent photos from Florida of sunsets warming their faces. I wiped Lily's forehead and changed the sheets and went back to work without thanks, because sometimes care is quiet. Today, the old dance still plays. My mother is charming at a fundraiser and brisk in the kitchen. My father is the kind of man who becomes a lectern when money enters the room. Their logic has a simple chorus. Lily is fragile and creative, buoyed by symbols and support. I am strong and self-sufficient, a ship that sails without wind. They call it fairness to give her more and me less because I can take it. I have spent years answering that music by doing more, speaking, less, bringing practical gifts they say they need, trying to earn what should have been ordinary. Then the text came from my mother, inviting me to a small family dinner for a surprise celebration of Lily's new job. Her message said she wanted to make things right. A photo of a frosted cake sat under the words as if sweetness could be sent through a screen. I stared at that line for a long time and let myself hope. I wrapped a cookbook Lily had once admired at the library, slid a note into the front cover that said, "I believe in you," and tied a thin red ribbon around the paper because the craft store ribbon was on sale and it matched the color of the cake roses in the photo. I did not know that ribbon would become a flag. After work, I bought a gas station bouquet and tucked the receipt into my wallet, still checking myself the way people who have been poor never stop checking. I rehearsed 2 sentences in the car, one about wanting respect, the other about wanting to build something new together, and I said them out loud until they felt like they belonged to me. Back home, I set my keys by the chipped gray mug and glanced at the stove clock. The green numbers read 6:12 p.m., and I thought about how early mornings start with that same glow. I straightened the ribbon on the gift, taking ridiculous care with the knot, and walked out into a night that felt as if it might finally let me in. My parents' split level has always looked shinier than the rest of the block. I carried plates without being asked, a reflex I learned as a girl. I set my gift on a side table beneath a photograph of 2 children playing in a sprinkler. Our hair slicked to our heads, a hose arcing summer into the air. My father cleared his throat, the clinked glass sound he always makes when he wants people to form a circle. He led us outside to the driveway. The garage door lifted, and there it was, paint as deep as a night lake, a BMW with a red bow sitting proud on its hood. For a second, the street held its breath and then flooded with applause. Neighbors stepped onto their lawns because spectacle asks for witnesses. My mother pressed a shiny key into Lily's palm, the key trailed by a tiny pom-pom charm that suited her. "This is to show faith in your new start," my mother said, and my father laughed about German engineering like he had invented torque. Lily squealed like a child and jumped into the driver's seat, hugged both parents one after the other, and tilted her chin for photos that snapped the air in bright little bites. Inside, while someone sliced cake, my mother handed me a white card with gold edges. It was heavier than it looked. Inside, taped neatly with pale blue tape, lay a $1 bill and a line printed in cursive about family tradition and luck in the new year. She said a few words to the room about how proud she was of my independence and thrift. She nodded toward Lily and explained, gentle in public, that gifts should meet needs, and Lily's need was reliable transportation for a demanding career. The room hummed with polite laughter that carried relief, as if everyone had been bracing for a conflict, and now they could take a bite of cake. Heat pressed behind my eyes. The card felt slick. My fingertips turned cold and then colder. I remembered the smell of that fabric glue in my prom season room and how my shoulders ached from leaning over a floor mirror. I thanked them and slid the bill into my pocket because I did not trust my voice to be a bridge and not a blade. In the kitchen, I stood by the sink and washed a plate that had not been used, circling it with a sponge, as if circles could calm anything. A cousin, the one who always arrives with a story too large for the room, joked that someday I would inherit the hand-me-down when Lily upgraded, and everyone chuckled like he had popped a harmless balloon. My mother drifted near and whispered, "Strong daughters do not keep score," her breath sweet with cinnamon. Lily, riding the glow, asked if I could help with her car insurance for the first few months until she got her feet under her, and added quickly that it would be a sisterly thing to do. I nodded in a way that did not mean yes, and set the plate down gently so I would not drop it. I let the rhythm of those numbers steady me. If I spoke right then, the words would have been sharp and ugly, and I am not interested in being right at the cost of being myself. I stood in my shoes and breathed and came to a decision, so even it felt like a line drawn with a ruler. I would stop trying to win a place in a story that keeps changing the rules. I would leave as soon as the night offered me a door. I would not argue. I would not plead. I would act. I stepped out for air, and my mother followed the heels of her shoes, clicking a neat metronome on the hardwood. She smiled in the way she does when she wants me to take a pill I did not ask for. "Tonight is fairness," she said, a balancing after years of weather. "You need less. You are our strong one. We will sleep better, knowing Lily is on the road, in something that will not leave her stranded. She touched my forearm the way you might test a roast for doneness. Then she asked, still smiling, if I would keep an eye on the paperwork so the car did not lapse. It would mean so much. I asked whether the dollar had been meant to be funny or kind. Her mouth did a small thing I have seen since I was a child. A little lift that says there is an inside game I do not understand. It is meaningful if you choose to see it that way, she said, as if seeing were the only magic needed. My father joined us with the solemn energy of a man carrying a ledger. He started explaining the lease in terms that made it sound like he was doing the dealership a favor. He said a visible gift helps Lily's confidence and brand at her new marketing job, and that image matters when you are selling yourself. He turned to me with an expression that asked me to nod, and said that since I am practical, I could contribute in a way that would not cost me. Drive her to pick up insurance forms. Co-sign if needed, just in case. Families invest where the return will be highest, he said, and he patted my shoulder in a way that made me feel stamped. Outside, Lily texted from the driveway asking me to ride with her in the morning to a dealership appointment for some ad on she now felt she needed. She added a winking line about how a responsible face helps when financing questions appear. I watched the 3 dots pulse. I sent back, "I will think about it," and slid the phone into my pocket, feeling the rectangle like a stone. The family group chat lit up with photos of the car, the red bow reaching into every shot like a bright hand, and a flood of hearts from relatives who had never once asked me what my workday felt like. An aunt typed that I have always been the rock. A cousin who sells real estate wrote that the whole night was a testament to good parenting. The dollar in my pocket pressed against my leg each time the phone vibrated, as if it wanted to be seen again. Back in the kitchen, I washed trays and stacked plates. It is what I do when I do not know what to do. Girls Lily had known in school stood by the island and planned road trips to places that have tunnels you can shout in for echo. Mr. Carter, the retired neighbor, whose kindness is a muscle he never lets go, slack-hauled a bag of trash to the curb and came back inside to lean against the doorframe near me. Fairness is sometimes a story we tell to cover fear, he said quietly, and he asked if I was all right. I nodded and folded the card closed again, telling myself that records matter, even private ones. Near the coffee maker, under a magnet shaped like a pineapple, lay a file folder labeled with Lily's name. On top was a list titled Parental Commitments. It was not dramatic, just ink on a page, the way intentions become contracts when no one says stop. Insurance, gas stipend, phone plan, moving fund. I stared at it longer than I meant to and let my chest rise and fall. From the dining room, I heard my mother tell a friend that I did not need help because I'm disciplined almost like a nun, and the friend laughed too loudly as if the joke had been rehearsed. In that sound, a plan arrived fully formed. I texted my friend Maya that I might come by late. I would leave tonight rather than smile through breakfast. I would write a note with words that could stand in the daylight. I would put our spare key in an envelope. I would take my name off the group chat. I would not announce any of this. I would simply do it. As the last guests hugged themselves into coats, my mother handed me leftovers in a bakery box that still smelled like someone else's frosting. "I know you like practical things," she said, and it landed on my arms, heavy with meaning I did not need. At the doorway, Lily asked again, about insurance, eyes bright with the kind of excitement that makes people forget other people are not props. "You make money work like origami," she said, and then laughed as if she had paid me a compliment I should display on a shelf. My father slipped Lily a card for gas and looked at me with a kind smile that turned in the light. Self-sufficiency is the oldest gift of all, he said. Outside, the night had crystal edges. I walked past the BMW and the red bow fluttered as if it wanted to wave. Lily revved the engine for the neighbors who had not yet run out of interest and shouted for me to get in for a spin around the block. I told her to drive safe, and the air smelled like cinnamon and exhaust and a holiday you do not get to attend. I slid into my old Corolla, the seat warm from the afternoon, and turned the radio off. I placed the white card on the passenger seat and looked at the single dollar like it might open its mouth and explain everything. I made a list out loud the way I do when the next hour matters. Pack 2 bags, water the plant, take the gray mug, leave the key, write the note. On the drive home, every light turned green, and then I realized they always do when the streets are empty and you keep moving. My apartment held the kind of quiet that has a heartbeat. The radiator ticked. The refrigerator hummed. The street lamp drew a pale stripe across the floor that I stepped over like a boundary. I pulled out a carry-on and a duffel. Jean sweater socks folded into little islands, the 2 good pairs of work shoes wrapped in grocery bags so they would not scuff anything else. I wrapped the chipped gray mug in a dish towel, the color of the inside of an almond, and placed it gently on top, as if it were fragile, which it was, and as if it could also endure anything, which it could. On the table, I laid the single dollar next to my library badge for a minute and looked at the 2 together like artifacts in a museum of ordinary lives. Then I slid the dollar into a folder labeled Records. I do not keep trophies. I keep truth. I wrote the note that had been waiting to exist. I love you. Tonight made things clear. I will not be contributing to Lily's car costs or acting as co-signer. Do not use me as your strong one to justify neglect. I am stepping back. When you are ready to speak to me as a person, not a tool, you can write me a letter. I signed my name and placed the house key on top, then took a photo of both for my own file because memory is better with paper. My phone read 2:57 a.m. numbers, like a green whisper. I thought of the oven timer from earlier, the 3 minutes blinking like a small metronome counting me toward this doorway. I turned my phone face down and inhaled once in a way that felt like an oath. I opened my contacts and scrolled without pressing anything. Not yet. First safety, then silence. I looked around the room that had been mine and chose myself. There is a holy quiet in a hallway at night. I locked my door, slipped the note and key into an envelope addressed to my parents to mail first thing, and stood with my bags listening to the building breathe. On her couch, I opened my contacts. Mother, father, Lily, group chat, block. I wrote an email to my parents that matched the paper note I would mail. I explained that I would accept letters only for now, and I would read them on Sundays, so that any reply I wrote would not come from adrenaline, but from thought. I turned off notifications for extended family and sealed my phone back into quiet. Relief did not pound a drum. It spread out a blanket and let me lie down on it. Before the blocks fully pressed the room into stillness, 3 messages slid through the last echoes of a parade that had already turned the corner. My mother wrote, "You are ungrateful." My father wrote, "We expect better from you." Lily wrote, "Do not make this about you." I stared at each sentence and pressed the small square that made future words from those numbers impossible. My phone faced the table. Toast jumped onto the back of the couch and purred at a volume that made a small engine feel near. I slept. Morning seeped into Maya's window like a kindness. Toast kneaded the blanket over my knees as if he were punching bread and could make it rise. I showered and borrowed a clean t-shirt that said a band name I had never heard of. The dented pot on Maya's stove produced oatmeal that tasted like calm. I made a list that fit on 1 page. Pick up certified mail envelopes. Change the door code on my building app. Switch my emergency contact at work from my mother to my coworker Grace. Schedule a session with a counselor. Ask Mr. Carter to witness me dropping the envelope at the post office because sometimes witnesses are not for courts but for nerve. Repair is a set of tasks written in ink. I moved my small backup savings to a separate account and added two-factor authentication so a code would always stand between impulse and damage. I updated beneficiaries on the accounts that would ask questions of strangers if I disappeared. I opened the form at my doctor's office and removed my parents from my emergency contact list, typed Grace's name, and hit save with a breath that left my lungs clean. I walked down the block to a community clinic where a counselor with a cardigan and a sturdy handshake sat across from me and listened while I explained the night not as a saga, but as a set of events that had a spine. She nodded. She said hurt lives in the body. She helped me craft 2 scripts for future communication that were short enough to remember in a parking lot. I love you, and I need respect to keep talking. I am not available for money or signatures. I am available for a walk. Back at the library, I ran a resume workshop with a whiteboard that still had a child's rocket ship ghosting the surface. A woman my age who had been out of paid work for a decade to raise children sat in the front row with a pen poised as if she might miss her own life if she blinked. We turned her years into sentences a hiring manager could not ignore. Organization, conflict resolution, procurement, logistics. She laughed when she saw the word logistics next to her name, delighted that the world had finally given her credit for something she had been doing in the dark. I felt the difference between helping because I chose to and being expected to carry someone else's load as a matter of course. Choice tastes cleaner. Mr. Carter stopped by the front desk with a paper bag of oranges and that slow smile he saves for people who need to borrow a little patience. He said some stories shrink us and some stories lift us, and that the trick is knowing which one you are in and moving your feet accordingly. We walked to the post office together at lunch, and he stood by while I mailed the envelope with the note and the key, his presence a small safeguard against the old habit of questioning myself mid-step. A week later, a certified letter arrived addressed to me at the library because I had listed that address for this very purpose. Inside was a 2-page note from my mother, written in her schoolteacher script. The first page wove apology and defense like stripes in a flag. She had wanted to show Lily faith. She thought my independence was a compliment. She wished I would not take things so literally. The second page asked for a conversation. My father added a sticky note in his square hand about responsibility and maturity and not embarrassing the family. I slid the pages back into the envelope and placed it in my bag. On Sunday afternoon, I made T set a timer for 30 minutes, read the letter with both eyes open, and wrote a short response. I am willing to meet with a family therapist. I will not discuss money, co-signing, or rescuing Lily. If you want a relationship with me, it needs to be based on respect, not roles. I mailed it the next day and did not wait for the sky to change color. That week, Lily texted from a different number, a photo of a small dent on the BMW's rear bumper, followed by a plea for help with the deductible. The words were breezy and urgent, a style I can spot in my sleep. I did not answer. I forwarded the message to a folder on my computer labeled Boundaries and blocked the number. In my notebook, I wrote a sentence that has saved me more than once. I do not rescue adults from the consequences of choices. I will help with information when asked with respect. The period at the end felt like a guardrail on a bridge in the dark. Meanwhile, life kept handing me small wins, so ordinary they almost escaped applause. I found a used bookshelf sturdy enough to hold my cookbooks without bowing, and spent a Saturday arranging them by the color of their spines, because order soothes me. I planted parsley on the kitchen sill and watched it decide to try. I wanted a grand finale, and instead, I got soup from the neighbor on the 3rd floor, left on my doormat, with a note that said "still warm" and a drawing of a heart that looked more like a potato. I got a photograph from Grace of her dog, asleep on a stack of program flyers, his face mashed flat into the paper, as if printing content by osmosis. Nights still came, where sleep would not unlock. Mornings still arrived, where coffee tasted like relief that did not require anyone else to pour it. On Sundays, I read whatever mail had come from my parents with the timer set and the phone off, and when the bell rang, I put the pages away and went outside, even if outside was just the stoop. This story is not about a car. It is about worth measured in attention and respect. A single dollar wrapped like a joke is still a message. You can call it tradition, but sometimes tradition is a costume sewn to hide a bruise. Boundaries are not punishments. They are the shape of love, when love has to include yourself. I used to think the generous person is the one who gives, without asking questions. Now I know the generous person is the one who can say yes when it is time, and no when it is time, and keep their voice the same volume. On my counter, the red ribbon I had tied around the bouquet the night of the party has a new job. It marks the page in my notebook where I write the small truths of each week. The single dollar sits in the records folder between a copy of my lease and a page of old phone numbers. It is not a wound anymore. It is an artifact. Tonight, the digital clock on my stove reads 7:10 p.m., and the pot on the back burner boils for pasta. The stripe of street lamp light lies on the wall, and for once it looks like decoration, not warning. I left at 3 a.m. because sometimes the only door that opens is the one you build yourself. If you walked with me to the end, tell me the city you call home and one boundary you have built that kept you steady. Share it in the comments so someone braver tomorrow can learn from you. If this story helped, please subscribe, and share it with a friend who might need a calm voice. Thank you for listening, and may your next step be clear, your coffee warm, and your peace stubborn.